So today we are continuing our series on the Mitzvah project, talking about Shabbat. And we are going to tackle a few main parts of Shabbat, not all of necessary what we listed last week, just a few main parts, and then we'll kind of see where we can work out the tentacles kind of from there. Somebody tell me, when you think of, or when you hear the word Shabbat, when you think about Shabbat, just tell me the one word that comes to mind when you think about Shabbat. Okay, good. I'm glad you said that, because that's what we're talking about today. Resting on Shabbat. Now, here's the interesting thing. I'm going to pull up this book. So this is Sefer HaChinuch. This is one of the references that we've talked about, right? This is a listing of the commandments of the mitzvot by Torah portion. So every parsha is a list of how many commandments that are in there. And Chinuch is an anonymous author. Nobody knows who wrote this work. But he based his commandments off of the listing by Maimonides, by Rambam, who had done this back in the 1100s. He just rearranged the order, basically, and made it different, made it being able to study by the Parsha. So remember last week we talked about the fact that the Jewish people have taken on this project of learning the mitzvot, the commandments, because it is the covenant, right? It's not working. They're not trying to be saved through doing all these things. It's because they are the people of God that have been entrusted with this covenant and with these commandments. And so throughout their history, in different circumstances, by different scholars and different teachers, they have undertaken to list the commandments. If this is what we're supposed to do, we better have a list. We better know what we're doing and not leave any to be forgotten. Why? Because one of the reasons attributed to the exile, the Babylonian exile, was because they did not keep the word of Hashem. And so if you break the commandments and you are ripped out of your land and your temple is destroyed and your government is destroyed and you get transported to a different place and settled there, and the reason is because you broke the laws of God, then whenever God returns you, your main focus is going to be, let's never do that ever again. And so Judaism post-Babylonian exile became incredibly focused on keeping the Torah and all the minutiae of the law and every detail and all of these things. And so when we get into some of these things, you're going to go like, oh, it makes my head hurt how detailed and some of the things they came up with. But understand why, right? Again, I'll say this, and I say it all the time because I think we just need to be reminded. So much of Judaism's evolution, and we use Judaism as the example because who else has kept the Torah? The church hasn't done it. Has the church evolved over its years? Yeah. Have they evolved in a Torah-keeping manner? No. Judaism, we look at Judaism as an example because they are the ones who have kept the Torah. But Judaism has changed and evolved much because of a way of reacting to what happens to it. Christianity does the same thing. All major religions do the same thing. We don't stay the way we have always been throughout our entire length of being, because we react to things around us. The church, many of us who are older, who grew up in church, you've seen the church change over the years, have you not? Now, there's a good chance in rural Louisiana or rural Mississippi or maybe Wisconsin or in small town rural places, you can still go and find a small country church like you and I grew up in. There's a good chance in some rural places around here you can find churches like we grew up in. But as a whole, Christianity has evolved as a reaction to its times. Judaism is the same way. The Jewish people were exiled, and so they reacted to that exile and the religion changed and looked a little bit different than it had pre-exile. And that's a good thing. That's the purpose for exile, is to get you to wake up. But we have never experienced exile. We've never really experienced religious pain at all. Maybe the most religious pain some of us have ever experienced is whenever the preacher's message is not really good. And I heard an old pastor say one time, the only thing worse than sitting through a bad message is preaching it. So if I'm ever not on and it's not good, you think you know it? I know it. With every word, with every breath, with every silence, I know this is not good. I'm wasting everybody's time. But we have never been exiled. We don't know what it is to react to this cataclysmic type of thing. And so when we look at some of these laws and some of these things, we have to remember the context of how some of these things came to be. So we're going to talk about resting on Shabbat. If we look at resting on Shabbat in Sefer HaChinuch, it's mitzvah number 85. Yeah, I got the right book. Mitzvah number 85. Now, the reason I want to show you this just as an example, and because I want to get you to think kind of a little bit more, a little bit less like a Westerner, a little bit more like an Easterner, if that is at all possible. So, just for example, this is mitzvah number 83 in this book, okay? So you see it starts here. There's a bunch of notes and a bunch of things. It is, according to this the prohibition upon a judge to accept bribery, okay? So it starts here. It goes here. Here. Still in the same commandment. Here, okay? So you got about 4 pages on that one. The next one is mitzvah 84, the obligation regarding Shemitah of the land, which is the rest of the land, right? So it starts here. Okay, so that's 2 pages, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 and a half, let's say, pages of explanation and commentary about that commandment. Okay? Here's mitzvah 85, our mitzvah, the one we're going to look at first regarding Shabbat. That's maybe not be the first one mentioned in the Torah, but it's the first one we're going to look at. The obligation to rest on Shabbat. Okay? 1 page, 2.5. Now, we're going to read some of this, but this should just cause you to think, okay, if resting on Shabbat is the thing we all think about when we think about Shabbat, it should be the big thing. That's what everything should talk about. How do we rest? If the point of Shabbat is to rest, shouldn't all the commentaries just talk about that? Shouldn't this be like 25 pages long, explaining the minutia of how to rest and what it means to rest and how to embody rest in the Shabbat and how to characterize your Shabbat by deep and meaningful and holy rest? 1.5 pages is all we get out of Sefer HaChinuch. This is what he has to say. And I'm not going to read the notes. The actual what he has to say about it is literally this right here. This is it. He says, based off of Exodus chapter 23, verse 12, which we'll read in a minute, we are commanded to desist from performing melacha. Now, somebody other than Kyle, tell me what melacha is. Work. I don't like this game. In the Torah, whenever you see a command relating to Shabbat says, you shall not do any work, the Hebrew word under the English, the original word is melacha. He says, we are commanded to desist from performing melacha on Shabbat, as it is stated in Exodus 23:12, and on the 7th day you shall rest. So, wait a minute. That doesn't make sense. Because the part of the verse he just quoted doesn't say anything about not doing melachah. It says you are to rest. See, the reason why I'm pushing this point is because I think a lot of times in our kind of Western thinking, we separate rest from work. We go, it's a mitzvah to rest. It's our job to rest, whatever that looks like. But you can't in the Torah separate rest from work. They're married, they're together, they're two sides of the same coin. So he says, we are commanded to desist from performing malacha, work, on the Sabbath day. Or what does that have to do with rest? Then he quotes Exodus 23:12, and on the seventh day you shall rest. And then under the section he has of laws of the mitzvah, this is what it says. All the particulars of this mitzvah are written above, which means previously, in the prohibitions that pertain to the topic of mitzvah number 32. Mitzvah number 32 in Hinuk's numbering is the commandment, thou shalt not perform any work. So he doesn't even go into an individual custom explanation of what rest is, because what rest is not doing malacha. Do you understand? There is no active, positive things that you do to rest from a Torah perspective, opposite not doing malacha. So the question is, what is malacha? Well, that's going to wait until 2 weeks. He says the mitzvah of Shabbat is repeated in the Torah no less than 12 times. We talked last week about how the Torah calls Shabbat the covenant, which means that Shabbat is not just a day. It's not just a moment in time. It's not just 25 hours, because Shabbat doesn't begin in the morning, and anybody out there who believes in a cosmic system where Shabbat begins in the morning is ignorant, and we're not going to even entertain that. It begins at sunset, Friday evening, period, full stop. Right? That's kosher. The Shabbat is not just a 25-hour period. It's not just a day of the week. It's not just a time. It is a covenant in itself. And the sages say that anyone who keeps Shabbat is credited to them as if they had done the whole Torah. Now, I'm not going to rail on Paul too much. There'll be time for that. But Paul makes this statement about the law that if you break one commandment, you've broken them all, right? And because we live in a doctrinal understanding of Pauline Christianity, there's a book out I saw the other day, something about like what Jesus learned from Paul or something like that. In other words, it's taken Paul's views of the gospel and made that the gospel and not Yeshua's words on the gospel. And people go, well, they don't contradict. Well, not really, but the way we read them can be contradictory. Anyway, like I said, that's for another time. I'll let Kyle do that at some point. So the Shabbat is the covenant. So whereas Paul says if you break one law, you've broken them all, the sages in Judaism say if you keep the Shabbat, you've kept it all. So it's an interesting play back and forth, right? However, if you break the Shabbat, it's as if you've broken the entire Torah, right? Which is just goes to the vastness of what Shabbat is. There's a beautiful message that I heard yesterday from a Chabad rabbi talking about resting on Shabbat and what it is. And his whole premise was that Shabbat is when you stop doing and you take a day to be. You take a day to be. And it's the day of the week. Shabbat is intended, it's the day that we're most like God. It's the day that we're most like Hashem. It's the day where Paul says that we have a flesh and a spirit. The sages of Judaism say that we have a Yetzer Hara and a Yetzer HaTov, an evil inclination, a good inclination. They also say we have a beastly nature and a divine nature. Those are all synonyms for flesh and spirit. They're the same thing that Paul was talking about, just in different ways. And so the Shabbat is the day of the week where our divine part is elevated, and our beastly part is supposed to be diminished. Supposed to be. And so this whole thing of resting is caught up with work, with melachah. But we read the verse from Exodus chapter 23, verse 12. And excuse me, let me get my Chumash real quick. I want to read a few of these other verses you can jot down just for your own study if you'd like to go back and review later. By the way, just a sneak peek into the lesson for a couple of weeks from now when we start talking about melachah. For those of you that love writing, taking notes, technically from a kosher standpoint, you're breaking Shabbat when you do that. So, sorry. Wah, wah. Well, we'll explain that. We'll talk about it. God, Robin, you have to throw your phone. Gee whiz. All right. This is from Shemot chapter 20. Remember Shabbat to sanctify it. 6 days you shall do your work and accomplish all your work. But the seventh day is a Shabbat to Hashem your God. You shall not do any work. You, your son, your daughter, your slave, your maidservant, your animal, the convert that was in your gates. For in 6 days Hashem made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all, and he rested on the seventh day. Therefore Hashem blessed the seventh day and sanctified it. So even there, you don't have a direct commandment to rest, right? You have a commandment not to melachah, whatever that is, okay? And then we go further in chapter 31, verse 15. If you're writing these down. Chapter 31, verse 15, and it says, excuse me, for 6 days work may be done. Again, that's melachah. And the seventh day is a day of complete rest. There we go. It is sacred to Hashem. Whoever does work on Shabbat shall be put to death. Now, there's some interesting details about that whole putting to death thing that we'll talk about at some point. Here again, you have a day of complete rest. A day of complete rest. And so we've talked about it before. What are ideas of rest? What do we think about when we think about rest? What does that mean to us as rest? It means what? I heard you say something. It means sleeping. It means eating oneg, getting full, some of you driving home, unfortunately, and then crawling up in your recliner or your bed or whatever, or laying out on the couch or the floor or whatever, whatever makes you happy, and getting deep into that Shabbat afternoon nap, right? There's no nap like a Shabbat nap, all right? But is it all that constitutes rest? Here's the thing about rest is that some of you, your rest is actually doing things. In order for you to rest, you have to be active. It's a mental rest, even though you're physically active. Now, here's the thing. There are types of work on Shabbat that are physically allowable, that you can do, that don't break Shabbat. But they're still what we would consider work. There are certain types of rest that are allowable on Shabbat, or that are not allowed on Shabbat that we would consider rest. So the whole thing is a world of its own. The point I want to try to make, that I'm trying to make to you, is that you can't just read the Torah and go, don't do any work and rest on Shabbat and go, okay, I understand. Got it. Okay? That means I'm not going to go to work. I'm not going to go to a scheduled job on Shabbat. And rest means I'm going to do whatever makes me restful. Right? And I've asked this question before. For me, mowing is therapeutic. Is it allowable for me to go and jump on the mower and mow this afternoon because that is restful to me? Does that mean I'm fulfilling Shabbat? What if you hate mowing? It's the worst job for you around the house. So if you don't mow, are you keeping Shabbat better than me that does go home to mow? You see what I'm saying? It doesn't make sense until we define melachah. Like I said, we'll get to that in a couple of weeks. So cliffhanger, you got to keep You got to keep watching. For those of you that are sighing, like, oh, get to it, you go study yourself. All right. Exodus chapter 34, verse 21. Chapter 34, verse 21 says, 6 days shall you work, and on the seventh day you shall desist or cease. So the work, the melachah that you do for 6 days, that's the work you're supposed to cease from, desist from, okay? And you go, well, like I work at a job 6 days a week. That's the work I need to desist from. Kind of. Kind of. You shall desist from plowing and harvesting. You go, well, I don't plow or harvest, so I can't stop that work. So what is it? What do I mean by kind of? Well, the idea of melachah, of work, is the same thing. We have to go all the way back to creation to understand what melachah is. And I'm going to give you this because we're going to have to repeat it again when we get to it. The idea of melachah, we have to go back to the original Shabbat, the first one. Who is the first ever to celebrate Shabbat? Hashem is, right? God is. He's the first one to celebrate Shabbat. Now, he gets through 6 days of doing what? Creating, organizing, separating, dividing, administrating, whatever, however you want to translate the verb bara, to create. He gets done with 6 days of that. And he says, it's tov meod, it's very good, it's perfectly functional. And now, it's time to rest, to cease. So obviously, you know this answer. Is God tired? Does God get tired? If he does, there's no hope for us because some of us will wear him out super quick, right? You got that kid that energizes you, like, oh, they're just, you know, every time you're around them, you get, and then you got that other kid that is just like, oh my God, they're parasitic. Like, not that they're bad, but just, you know, they just crave so much attention and need, you know, so much, you know. Don't tell me which ones they are, it doesn't matter. But you know who they are. Some of us, you know, God would be like, look, man, it's been 20 minutes already. I need a nap. But God, whatever this ceasing is not because Hashem is tired. Whatever this rest is not because he's tired. He spent 6 days creating. What is this creating that he's doing? He's taking, now, again, I don't want to go back and teach Genesis again, but depending on some of the ways that we traditionally have thought about Genesis, he's creating things out of nothing, ex nihilo, right? There's just a bunch of nothingness, and God just says, abracadabra, and there's water. Except that's not what the text says. The text says that there was waters at the beginning. And the Spirit did something, I love this Hebrew word, merachefet. He hovered, right, over the water. So there was something in the beginning, which kind of plays with our minds, but nevertheless, the way that we have taught Genesis, the way that I understand it, I like to think about it, is that it's not that God is creating stuff out of nothing. Can he? Sure. Is that what Genesis 1 is trying to talk about? No. We take under assumption that God, whatever is there, God did it. But there is matter there. But it's chaotic. It's not functional. It's just random and chaos and just stuff that has no organization, no purpose, no function. It cannot operate for the service of God like it is intended to because it's disjointed. It's chaotic. And so what is God doing during the 6 days? Is he is organizing and he is separating. You see that in the text. He makes a space for things to go, and then he puts the things that go there. In the first half of the week, he's making spaces, the seas, the ground, the sky. In the second half of the week, he's putting in fish and seeds and trees and birds and et cetera, right? He is He is an administrator. Like we talked about it when we did our Genesis series. For those of you that are teachers, or you work in an office, or you work with paperwork, clerical stuff, any of that kind of thing, if your boss tells you, I want you to create a packet for me to present to a client. I want you to create a packet of information, a presentation. Are you making the paper from scratch? Are you making the ink that prints the information from scratch? The material, the knowledge that goes on that, are you creating that from scratch? What you're doing is you're taking existing things that are not yet together, and you're pairing them together in a functional system that communicates and creates a service, that creates a function. That is what God is doing during the first 6 days of creation. That is what he is resting from. Now, I've said this before, it bears repeating. If you are going to rest on Shabbat, you can only cease when you have been active. You can't cease ceasing. You can't stop from a position of being stopped. You can't be still from a position of being still. In order for there to be a ceasing, a resting, you have to go all 6 days. And here, even in Exodus 34:21, he says, 6 days you shall work. In the previous passage we read, it says, in 6 days shall all your work be accomplished. Which means what? Which means at sunset on Saturday evening or sunrise on Sunday morning, you better hit the ground running. Because why? You've only got 6 days to do everything you've got to do. Whatever you can get done in those 6 days, that's it. Because when the sun sets on Friday, that's it. Time is done. Either it'll have to carry over to next week, or the next week, or the next week. Which means we have to become masters of our own time and of our own schedule. That's something hard for us to do. Well, what if I work 40 hours a week and yet I have stuff that I have to do at home afterwards that I can't get to do because I have to work all week? Then maybe you have too much stuff at home that requires your attention afterwards. You see what I'm saying? Maybe it's a time to move things around and reprioritize. I'm not saying that's the answer for you. I'm just saying these are options that we need to think about. One more passage we're going to look at is in Leviticus chapter 23. Of course, Vayikra 23, Leviticus 23 is the landing zone for all of the celebrations, holy days, festivals, including Shabbat. And so in Vayikra 23, it says, we'll start in verse 1, it says, Hashem spoke to Moshe, saying, speak to Bnei Israel and say to them, Hashem's appointed festivals, appointed times, Moedim, that you shall designate as holy convocations. These are my appointed festivals. For 6 days labor may be done. Now in Exodus it says, get all your stuff done in 6 days. In Leviticus it's translated as may be done. Well, you can work for 6 days or 5 or 4, whatever, it doesn't matter. But the seventh day is a day of complete rest. We have that word again. A holy convocation, you shall not do any work. It is a Shabbat for Hashem in all your dwelling places. Now, we're going to look at a couple of halakhic references to this. The interesting thing about this is that when you look in Judaism, in the Oral Torah and the Mishnah and different places for, okay, give me specifics on how to, this is a commandment to rest. It's obviously the way we all think about Shabbat. So when we go to the Oral Torah, we go to the Torah itself, what does the Torah tell you about how to rest? Let's do that first. It doesn't. Oh, good, you noticed that. It doesn't, right? It just says, don't do work, which means, again, we have to define malachah in order to know what real rest is like. And so what I want you to understand about rest and about, we'll see this as we go next week. We're going to talk about sanctifying and remembering Shabbat. We may do Melachah next week. I don't know. I'll see how I feel. What you're going to understand is that you cannot separate the commandments of Shabbat into their own universe. In other words, last week, or week before, whatever, we listed, right? We listed commandments as we went through the Torah, talking about Shabbat, to sanctify it, to not work. Right? We listed all those things. And there's really not a way of taking out one and going, this is how you do this part of Shabbat by itself. Now, there are laws according to every piece of Shabbat, but they all are interwoven together with every other part of Shabbat. It's beautiful. There's a story about a young man who comes to a rabbi and says, Rabbi, my mother always lit 2 candles on Shabbat. Why 2 candles? And the rabbi said, well, among other things, his explanation was, they signify the animal soul and the divine soul, or the divine animal part and the divine part of us. And by the way, if you're not used to hearing animal soul or beastly soul, you might think like, well, what does that mean? It's kind of offensive. Well, whenever you lash out, whenever you act in a way that is not the human part of God, the best part of who God calls you, that's your beastly nature that's coming out. And it comes out all the time. It happens all the time. And it's this play between that flesh and spirit, if you want to put it that way. But one flame represents the beastly side of us. One flame represents the divine side of us. And on Shabbat, when we light 2 candles, we light one that represents the beast side first, the second representing the divine side. We are telling ourselves that we are transitioning in that lighting. That lighting is part of our transitioning to the elevated part of us, where we spend 25 hours contemplating and enjoying the elevated side of who we're supposed to be. Now, for those of you that do Havdalah, so you have 2 flames, 2 candles. For those of you that do Havdalah or have done Havdalah before, how many candles are lit during Havdalah? 1. How many flames are there during Havdalah? At least 2. Usually 3 or 4, depending on the Havdalah candle. Hold on. There are many designs for the Havdalah candle. This is an old one, obviously. This one has 9. This is kind of like a menorah type Havdalah candle. So, are you telling me that we elevate ourselves once a day, we become the ideal part of ourselves once a day, and then the rest of the week we just go back to our old beastly selves? That's just like going to church and getting all excited and then going to lunch and chewing out the waitress. We've been there, done that. Listen, when I work on Sundays at Tractor Supply, it's so funny to me because people come in mad. They come in looking like this. Now, I don't know if they're mad or if that's just their face. But they come in seemingly frustrated, upset. They walk in the door. You see them coming into the parking lot. They get out of the car. And you know what's really funny about that? It's because they're usually dressed up. Which means, you know what? They just came from church. And it's just so amusing to me to watch. You would expect them to come in like just, hey, it's a great day at Tractor Supply. I'm blessed to be here. But no, they come in mad. So, 9 times out of 10 it happens. I've watched this for 4 months just to make sure it wasn't a fluke a couple of days. And it's consistently this way. And you know what? I'm going to pick on Pentecostals for a little bit because y'all are the worst. Pentecostals come into the store from a Sunday service, and they're the meanest, rudest on average. I'm sorry, it's my experience. I ain't got nothing against Pentecostals. I love you. Great hugs and kisses and shalom and blessings. But y'all got to get this right. Y'all got to change. Y'all got to fix this. I'll tack on. From the restaurant. Oh, from the restaurant business? I'm sorry to poo-poo on Pentecostals this morning, but it's just this. So what you're saying is that on Shabbat, we have this beautiful elevation of our soul. We rest and we get in contact with our better part, our elevated part, and we are supposed to enjoy the way we are supposed to be. But then at sunset, it's kind of like, when the werewolves, when the full moon comes out and the sun sets and then you turn from a human to a werewolf, that's what happens. We get back into our beastly side for the rest of the week. The candle of Havdalah teaches us, no, that's not the case. Because in the candle of Havdalah, our beastly side and our divine side are interwoven into one flame. These 9 little wicks, when you light it, become one flame. And so it is us to learn every Shabbat and to take from Shabbat what it should mean. There's a way that I heard rest described that I thought was beautiful. Rest, many of us rest, we take a nap, we come, we study Torah, we hear a message, we worship, we pray, we do all the things that are perfunctory for keeping Shabbat maybe in our context. But there's one word, and I just never have thought about this, that I heard someone say. You may be resting, but are you in a state of serenity? Serenity is not a word that you hear a whole lot nowadays, or not one that I hear. How many of you, when you sleep, when you rest, are restless? You know, you get 7 hours of sleep and you wake up, feel like you've been hit by a truck. Anybody? Okay. You are quote unquote resting, but there's no serenity. And a part of the Shabbat rest is not just taking a physical nap, but it is tapping in to a place of serenity, which I think is really challenging because it's not something that we do well. And so when we light the Havdalah candles and we have this mixture of who we are, it's to take the best sides of our animal nature. Do you know that your animal nature, your flesh, that the New Testament seems to demean so bad, or that we read it as demeaning so bad? I don't think Paul thought the flesh was all bad, because Paul is Jewish and he understands that the flesh is necessary. There's a good part of your animalistic side. It's the part that causes you to live and function in this world, where we learn to tamper down the bad parts and play up the best parts of that animal mind in conjunction with the divineness of who we're supposed to be, the image of Messiah, right? So just a couple of halakhic references really quick. These are super quick because, again, they can't be really separated from each other. So this is a book called the Shulchan Aruch, and it is the most recent, probably, code of Jewish law. And there's 5 volumes of this, and what's really cool is that this is not the first volume, but the first volume opens up with when you wake up. And it literally tells you everything to do from the moment you wake up till the moment you go to bed, according to Jewish code of law. There's about 12 pages on the beginnings of understanding Shabbat. Not one thing mentions the rest, because the rest is intricately interwoven into what you're not supposed to do. And that's how rest is defined. But we'll read a couple. Here's from Mishneh Torah, which is another halakhic, right? Well, if I can do the little thingy. All right. Come on. Sorry, hang on, give me a second. Technology is not technologying today on various different levels. There we go. In Mishneh Torah, this is talking about the things that you're not supposed to do. So just to give you an idea, it's forbidden to transfer a burden on an animal on the Shabbat, because Exodus 23:12 tells us that your ox and your donkey should have rest, right? This includes not only a donkey or animal, but all animals. Although a person is commanded to have his animals rest, the prohibition is derived from a positive commandment. So it says there is also an explicit prohibition in the Torah against working with an animal. Do not do any work, melacha, on the Shabbat. It is permitted to sell, listen to this. This be in your mind. It is permitted to sell a Gentile a horse. Since the horse is used only for human transportation and not for transporting burdens. Hence, there is no forbidden labor involved because a living entity carries itself, even though the horse is carrying you. There's so much minutia here. There's so much detail about what it means to rest and to not work and how to keep the Shabbat. One more, and then we'll move on to the last part of this part. Regarding Shabbat, the Torah states, on the seventh day you shall cease activity. That's the word for rest. This implies ceasing even the performance of certain activities that are not included in the categories of forbidden labors. The Torah left the definition of the scope of this commandment to the sages, who forbade many activities. Some activities are forbidden because they resemble the forbidden labors. So you have the melachah, the things that you're prohibited from doing. Some things are not those things specifically, but they look like them. And so they're forbidden. While other things are forbidden so that they don't lead to one of those forbidden or prohibited labors, right? And then it goes into like 18 paragraphs on a person who levels crevices in the ground. I kid you not. Go home, look up Sefaria, look up Mishneh Torah, Shabbat 21, and you'll be enthralled with dynamic and exciting reading about how it's forbidden to level crevices. For instance, you can't spit on the ground and then wipe it with your foot, because if that part of the ground was raised and then part of it next to it was depressed, you've just leveled a crevice, and that's technically performing a prohibited task on Shabbat. And you're going, oy vey. Welcome to the code of Jewish law. Yay! You wanted to keep Shabbat. This is you. You asked for this, all right? No, I'm just joking. So, lastly, and finishing up, the Shulchan Aruch talks about how this book right here, which is also available on Sefaria, you can look at it there. Stop. Talks about the importance of what it means to protect the Shabbat. And how the interplay of positive and negative commandments work. You shall rest is a positive commandment. You shall rest. You shall cease. That's a positive. To do. The interplay between positive and negative commandments is that the you shall, the positive, the to do, can only be accomplished by its partnering negative commandments. You shall not do. And so this beautiful interplay of to do and not to do, to be or not to be, I couldn't help myself, is very important as we start to learn what it means to actually rest. So if you're more lost now than you were when we started, good. Good. That's a good place to be. Don't be like, oh, I don't get it. Why did he say it and I didn't catch it? No, I didn't. I didn't give you any answers or any solutions. What I want you to feel is I want you to feel the uneasiness of not knowing. I want you to feel the lack of competency in resting on Shabbat. Because there's a good chance that you thought you were doing it right. And you may have been doing pieces and parts of it right. But what we're looking for is a fuller, more deeper understanding of not just if the only rest you get on Shabbat is the hour-long nap, or 3 hours, that you get in the afternoon after Shabbat, you haven't rested on Shabbat, because Shabbat is not just 3 hours long, right? So the rest, the complete rest that the Torah speaks of, cannot just be a nap. There's something there deeper that we need to understand that is a part of the cosmic world that is Shabbat. Right? So this is just kind of a cliffhanger, just to kind of whet your palate. Again, I'll see next week as my studying is coming along. We may do Melachah next week. We may do something different. We'll see. If y'all want to lobby for one or the other, I'm willing to take bribes. No, I'm joking. But we'll look at what we're doing next week and get into the details a little bit more. All right? Very good. Okay. Thank you, guys.